I didn't hear their voices when I called. I heard laughter instead, distant, filtered through weak signal and fake apologies. They told me the cabin was too cold this year, that the snowstorm might cut the power, and no one wanted to risk getting stranded, especially with the kids. But then I saw the photos. Selfies posted online. Cozy smiles, marshmallows roasting, sleds carving paths through fresh powder. Our cabin. My cabin. The lies didn't just sting, they hollowed me out. I remember a time when winter meant togetherness. When snow blanketed the woods and the cabin turned into a cocoon of memories, hot chocolate, the smell of cedar, my husband humming old songs as he built a fire. We'd sit with the kids and later the grandkids, wrapped in quilts, telling stories over creaking floorboards and games of Scrabble. The cabin wasn't just a retreat, it was our legacy. But now, I sat in my suburban living room, the heat hissing through the vents, sterile and dry. No scent of pine, no wood crackling, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the buzz of a space heater in the corner. I stared at the screen, thumb trembling, rereading the captions. Winter escape, cabin life. All four of them. Even little Maddie in the red jacket I knit last fall. The one she promised to wear when she visited me. The one she now wore grinning beside a snowman I didn't help build. They went without me. After everything. The phone had rung once that week. Just once. It was Jenna, my daughter, calling 3 days before Christmas. She spoke fast, upbeat, rehearsed. Hi, Mom. We're rethinking the trip. Storm's supposed to be rough this year. Kids have been coughing. Eric's car might not make the drive. I know how much you love the cabin, but it's probably best to skip it. Just this once. I didn't argue. I never argue. That's how mothers lose their place. I nodded, whispered, "Of course, sweetheart. Stay safe." I didn't say I'd already packed my suitcase. That I'd been baking cookies, freezing meals, laying out linens and firewood. I didn't mention the wreath I'd handmade from cabin pine cones and cranberry twine. It was hanging on the door, waiting. I didn't tell her I'd called the propane company to double-check the generator. Instead, I said, next year. I even smiled, like fools do. But the truth doesn't hide forever. That morning, December 27th, I logged into Facebook because the house was too quiet and the air smelled like last year's grief. I didn't expect to find betrayal tucked between recipe videos and holiday ads. But there they were. The selfies. Our same plaid curtains in the background. The vintage lamp from my mother's house glowing behind them. The fire I had chopped logs for last spring. Every frame a bullet I didn't know how to dodge. Maddie was sipping hot cocoa from my mug, the green one with a chip near the rim. I gave it to her when she was 8, said it was the magic cocoa mug. She swore she'd only drink cocoa from it in the mountains. I watched her take a boomerang video of the marshmallow melting in the mug. Watched the loop. Again and again. I didn't cry right away. No, I stood. I walked to the hallway. Turned on the light. I reached for the shelf above the coat rack and pulled down the tin where I kept letters. Old, folded notes from my husband. Postcards from road trips. A drawing Maddie made when she was 5, me with a crooked crown and stick arms, labeled Best Grandma in the World. I held it in my lap. Then I cried. Not the pretty kind of tears, the kind that wrinkle the soul. That night, I lit a fire in the fake electric fireplace, the one Jenna had bought me 2 Christmases ago, so I wouldn't have to deal with real wood. It crackled with artificial confidence. The flame colors danced, too orange to be believable. I sat in front of it and poured myself a drink, the good scotch, the one I hadn't touched since Alan's funeral. I raised the glass to the shadows. To cold winters and warm lies, I said, and to mothers, the easiest ones to leave behind. They used to say I was the glue, that I held the family together. But glue dries, and when it's ignored too long, it cracks. On December 30th, Jenna called again. I almost didn't answer, but the guilt in me, the well-trained, Neelan smile kind, reached for the phone. Hi, Mom. We're back. Phew, what a storm. Gosh, you wouldn't have liked it. Power flickered. Roads were icy. Maddie got carsick. We thought of you the whole time. I swallowed. Did you? I asked softly. There was a pause. Jenna shifted tones. Mom, is everything okay? I didn't speak right away. Then I asked, was it the cough? Or the car? Or was it just easier without me? Her voice dropped. Mom, I saw the photos, Jenna. She went quiet. I wasn't supposed to, I said. But I did. I didn't post them, she muttered. But you were in them. She sighed. Mom, we just thought you always talk about how cold it gets. And you've been tired. You said so. We didn't want to put pressure on you. Tired, I repeated. I could hear Maddie laughing in the background. The sound twisted something in my chest. You could have told me the truth, I said. Jenna was quiet again. Then, we'll come visit this weekend, okay? We'll bring takeout. Thai food. Your favorite. I smiled, but only because the pain had turned numb. Sure, I said. Bring extra chili sauce. They came Saturday. 3 days late, and one storm too late. Jenna kissed my cheek. Eric looked sheepish. Maddie ran past me to the kitchen. No one mentioned the cabin. We ate pad thai in silence while some reality show played in the background. No one noticed that I'd cleared a shelf. No one asked why the guest room smelled like cedar and snow. No one saw the cabin, key missing from the hook by the door. Because they thought I was too old to go. Too tired. Too cold. But what they forgot is that mothers don't stop loving. They just stop waiting. That night, after they left, I opened the drawer under the old bench in the hallway, the one Alan built with his own hands. Inside was my winter bag, already packed. Well, thermals, hand warmers, a canister of trail mix, the first aid kit. I had even tucked in the photo of Alan, the one where he was splitting wood, looking up mid-swing like I'd just caught him doing something boyish. I stared at the packed bag for a long time. The house was still. The leftover pad thai sat on the counter, growing cold like the space they left behind. I picked up the cabin key. It was heavier than I remembered. I didn't sleep. By dawn, I was on the road. 32 degrees. Black ice warnings. Who cared? I drove slowly. No music. Just the sound of tires crunching old frost and my breath fogging the windshield. They said I couldn't go. They said it was too cold. But they forgot this cabin didn't belong to them. It was mine. Built by our hands. Kept alive by my memories. I crested the last hill before the turnoff, and the pines opened like a mouth exhaling silence. Snow clung to every branch. The driveway hadn't been plowed, but the tracks from their tires were still there, fresh, shallow, unmistakably theirs. My foot pressed the brake. I stared at the prints. They had been here less than 2 days ago, and no one had thought to leave a note. A crumb. A flower on the porch rail. Nothing. The porch creaked under my boots. I fumbled with the key, fingers stiff. The lock clicked and the door groaned open, sighing like an old friend who hadn't been hugged in too long. Inside, it was cold, but not unwelcoming. The fire was out, but ashes glowed faintly, proof of recent life. The couch pillows were still dented. A board game lay half-finished on the rug. A cocoa ring stained the doily on the coffee table, the one I crocheted 30 Christmases ago. I dropped my bag and sat down, right in the middle of the floor, and felt the first tear fall. I stayed for 5 days. Long enough for the generator to hum again, for the pipes to groan and warm, for my bones to remember the rhythm of the woods. I lit fires, cooked stew, read Alan's old books. I pulled out the radio and tuned it to static until I found a station playing country love songs and whispered dedications. I made a list of things I wanted to fix: the loose window frame, the crooked curtain rod, the cracked mug handle. I didn't tell anyone I was here. No texts. No Facebook updates. No, made it safely messages. I didn't know them that. On the 4th day, it snowed heavy. White covered everything: the drive, the porch, even the tire tracks. It was like nature had decided to give me a blank page. A do-over. I took Alan's old camera out on the deck. The kind that clicks when it wins. I hadn't used it in years. I aimed it at the hills, at the icicles on the eaves, at the cabin lights glowing through frosted glass. And then I turned it on myself. Just once. I looked into the lens with no makeup, no smile. Just truth. Click. It was the first photo of me I'd taken in a decade. Back in town, people started to notice I hadn't been posting. Jenna texted on day 6. Hey, Mom. Just checking in. Everything okay? I didn't reply. Then, did you get my message? We've been worried. The storm got bad again. We can drive up this weekend if you're at the house. Still, I said nothing. Let them wonder. Let silence do what words never could. I stayed until the bread ran out. When I left the bedsheets fresh, the fridge empty, the firewood stacked by the door. But I didn't leave angry. I left changed. By the time I got back to the city, there were 3 voicemails and 8 texts. Jenna, Mom, seriously. Where are you? Eric. Hi. Mrs. K. Just wondering if you need anything. Please call. Maddie even wrote, Hi, Grandma. Did I do something wrong? I miss you. That one almost cracked me. But no. This time, I wouldn't be guilt back into invisibility. 3 days later, I invited them over. No reason given. Just dinner. 6 p.m., come hungry. They arrived with wary smiles, unsure of what they'd find. They found me in the kitchen, wearing my apron, stirring stew. No candles, no warmth in my eyes. But there was food. That was enough for now. We ate in silence at first. Then I pulled out the photo, the one I took on the porch, and slid it across the table. Jenna picked it up. Her face changed. Maddie leaned over. Grandma, you were there? I nodded. You said it was too cold, I said. Eric cleared his throat. We didn't know you'd. Would have what? I asked. Gone anyway? Lived anyway? Loved anyway? Jenna's eyes glistened. Mom, we thought we were protecting you. No, I said softly. You were protecting yourselves. From guilt. From obligation. From the discomfort of remembering I still need love. Silence again. Then Maddie reached out and held my hand. Next time, she whispered, I'll ride up with you. We'll build our own snowman. I smiled. A small one. Next time, I said, you'll ask first if I want to go. After dinner, they helped clean. Jenna lingered behind. She hovered in the hallway, looking at the framed cabin photos. Alan chopping wood. Me holding baby Jenna in front of the fire. The generations frozen in time. I never meant to shut you out, she said. I know, I said. But you did. She looked at me, finally seeing the weight behind my eyes. How do I fix it? You don't, I said. You visit. You listen. You make room for my presence instead of fitting me into your convenience. She nodded. Quietly. That was the first time she understood what it meant to be a daughter again. In March, I got a letter in the mail. Maddie's handwriting. Inside was a sketch. Me wearing my knitted sweater, smiling by a fire, holding cocoa in the chipped mug. On the bottom, she wrote, Next winter, I'll bring the marshmallows. I framed it. Right beside the porch photo. Because healing doesn't come in apologies. It comes in remembering to show up. The morning after Jenna and Maddie left, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table long after the sun rose, letting the light spill through the lace curtains Alan hung himself 30 winters ago. It cast a familiar pattern on the wood, little floral ghosts of years gone by. I used to watch that same light pattern dance across Alan's hands as he flipped pancakes or reached for the coffee tin. Sometimes he'd wink, call it the sun's signature, like the house was trying to write us love letters. Back then, I believed him. That morning, I believed it again. I stood, walked over to the old closet near the back door, the one we rarely opened. Inside were 3 boxes. I hadn't touched them in years. One was filled with letters not ours, but ones I'd never sent. Letters I wrote to Jenna after she left for college and stopped calling so often. Letters I wrote after Alan died, when silence filled the cabin like floodwater and I didn't want to drown alone. Letters I wrote when Maddie was born, and again when I wasn't invited to her first recital because they thought the drive would be too much. I sat on the floor and read them. All of them. Some were angry. Some were heartbreaking. All were honest. It's funny, the things we never say out loud because we want to be the good mother. Quiet, gracious, understanding, convenient. I realized I had built myself into a box too, one labeled reliable, soft, not a burden. That night, I took one of the letters and burned it in the fireplace. Not out of anger, but as an offering. A promise to myself that I would stop waiting for them to remember I'm still here. I would start showing them. The next morning, I booked the cabin for New Year's next year. Yes, a full year in advance. I prepaid the maintenance fee, called the local guy, Frank, to make sure the road would be plowed. I told him I'd bring extra supplies and leave them stocked not for anyone else, but because the cabin deserved to be ready, whether anyone showed up or not. And then I did something harder. I wrote them each a letter. Jenna's letter was short. You're a good daughter. I know that. But even good daughters can forget their mothers are still women. Still people. I'm not asking to be the center of your world, just not erased from it. I'll be at the cabin next New Year's. With or without you. Love, Mom. Eric's letter was simpler. You've always been kind. Thank you for taking care of my daughter. Now take care of her mother, too. Bring snow chains. Maddie's letter broke me a little. When you were 4, you asked me if the snow ever missed the sky once it fell. I didn't know how to answer. Now I do. Yes. It misses where it came from. I miss you like that. Come find me next year. We'll make snow angels big enough to be seen from heaven. I mailed the letters. No texts. No follow-ups. Just old-fashioned envelopes. Handwritten. The way love used to travel. Spring came and the garden bloomed, and still, no one spoke of the cabin. Summer passed with birthday cards and polite phone calls. I didn't push. I didn't remind. Fall brought the ache, the quiet whisper in my chest that always precedes the holidays. The fear that I'd be too much or not enough again. But I stood firm. I cooked. I baked. I refilled the woodshed. And I waited not for them, but for winter. The day after Christmas, I loaded up my station wagon with groceries, extra blankets, and the same old cabin key. I left the house by dawn, just like before. This time, I didn't look back. The drive was harder than last year. More snow, more ice. My hands trembled more. I had to stop twice to stretch out a stiff hip. But the closer I got, the more alive I felt. There's something sacred about choosing yourself not in anger, but in dignity. When I pulled into the driveway, it was untouched. No tire tracks. No footprints. No one had beaten me there. And that was okay. I shoveled the path myself. Lit the fire. Hung the wreath. And by sundown, the cabin was glowing. Alive. The next morning, I sat on the porch with coffee, wrapped in the old red quilt. I watched snow flurries drift like whispers from heaven. No one had arrived. No texts. No calls. I felt the ache begin, that small, sharp thorn in my chest that always came when expectations went unmet. But then around noon a sound. Tires. Voices. Laughter. I stood up, heart thudding. Down the drive came Eric's SUV, crawling carefully over packed snow. Behind it, Maddie's small blue car, fishtailing slightly as it braked. They came. They actually came. Jenna stepped out first, bundled, breath puffing. She didn't wave right away. She just stared at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. Then Maddie barreled out of the car behind her, holding a thermos. "Grandma," she shouted. "We brought marshmallows." I started to cry before I could stop myself. They ran toward me. No apologies. No speeches. Just arms. Warm, shaking arms. That night, the cabin pulsed with life again. Music from the old radio. Socks drying by the fire. 3 generations of voices echoing through the walls that had once only heard mine. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. They saw me now. Not as background. Not as obligation. But as the heart. The beating, burning center of a family that almost forgot what glue feels like. By the second day, something began to shift between us. It wasn't spoken aloud. There were no big confrontations, no dramatic outbursts, just quiet moments, one after another, stacking like kindling beneath the surface. It started with Eric offering to chop firewood unasked. I watched from the kitchen window, arms folded, lips pressed. He struggled at first, the axe too unfamiliar in his hands, the snow sticking to his boots. But he kept going. Every swing was clumsy and earnest. Later, he brought in a stack, cheeks red, chest heaving. "You and Alan made this look easy," he said. I didn't smile, but I nodded. "You're getting there." That evening, Jenna found the old recipe box. I hadn't realized she was even looking through the cupboards, but there she was kneeling on the tiled floor, wooden box in hand, flipping through yellowed index cards written in my mother's cursive. She held up one card. "Hot buttered rum." I looked over my glasses. "Your father's favorite." Jenna blinked, her thumb stroking the edge of the card. I forgot about this box. I remember it smelled like cinnamon and old paper. It still does. She paused. "Can I make this?" I raised an eyebrow. "Can you follow directions?" She laughed. "Well enough." So we made it together. She read the instructions while I measured. Maddie grated nutmeg. We took our first sips together, and for the first time in years, the house tasted like memory. Later, after Maddie went to bed and Eric dozed in the rocker, Jenna and I sat by the fire. I watched the flames, not her, as she spoke. "You were right," she said quietly. "Last year." I said nothing. I lied to myself, you know. Told myself it would be easier. That you wouldn't really want to come. That you'd say no anyway. But when we got there, and I saw the way the cabin still looked like your hands had touched everything, I knew we were wrong. I sipped slowly. Let her sit in it. "I was tired," she whispered. "Tired of trying to be everything for everyone. And somehow, leaving you out made things simpler." Now I turned to look at her. "You can be tired," I said. "But not cruel." She nodded. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I'm sorry, Mom. Really." I reached over and took her hand. "Next time, just tell me the truth." even if it hurts. I'd rather be hurt by honesty than erased by kindness. Jenna nodded again. This time she cried. We sat like that, fire popping, night howling outside, and let the silence be its own kind of repair. On the third day, Maddie woke me before sunrise. She stood at the edge of my bed, cheeks flushed, snow pants already on over her pajamas. Grandma, she whispered, can we go outside before breakfast? I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. It's dark. I brought extra mittens. I'll help you. I grinned despite the ache in my hips. All right. The air was biting. Our breaths came out in clouds. But the world was quiet in that holy kind of way, snow muffling the earth, the woods holding their breath. Maddie led me to the meadow behind the cabin, the one Alan and I used to snowshoe through. She handed me a small shovel. What's this for? You'll see. She began digging. I helped, slowly. Our shovels cut through the powder, revealing the glint of something buried beneath. A tarp. She tugged at it, revealing an old wooden sled. I found it in the shed yesterday, she said. I thought it should ride again. I blinked. My heart clenched. Alan had built it himself, sanded it smooth, painted the runners red. Maddie had ridden it once, years ago, but it had been forgotten, left to gather dust. Until now. She sat down on it, looking up at me with the same stubborn sparkle her mother once had. Ready? I laughed, a real, surprised laugh. Absolutely not. She kicked off anyway. The sled rushed forward, carrying her down the small hill, her shrieks of joy echoing through the pines. I watched her go, one hand on my chest, and felt something I hadn't felt in so long. Pride, joy, belonging. I wasn't just here. I was part of it again. Later, we built a snowman. No, 3. One for me, one for Alan, one for all the years they forgot me, the coldest one, left slightly unfinished. When Maddie asked why the third one didn't have arms, I just smiled. Some things are still reaching. That night, after stew and board games and cocoa, in the green chipped mug, I stepped outside. The moon was full. The snow shimmered. My breath fogged the air like a prayer. Inside, I heard laughter. My family. My family. It didn't matter how long it had taken them. They were here now. I took Alan's camera again and snapped one more photo of the cabin at night, the windows glowing, shadows dancing inside. Then I turned the lens toward myself. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply was. A woman not waiting to be seen anymore. A woman who went anyway. The next morning, they packed to leave. The storm was coming in fast. Jenna wanted to get ahead of the worst of it. They hugged me tightly. No rush goodbyes. Maddie pressed something into my hand, a small envelope. Open it later, she whispered. Then they were gone. Hours passed. The house settled into quiet. Not lonely this time. Just full. I made tea, sat by the fire, and opened Maddie's envelope. Inside was a drawing. The 3 snowmen, standing side by side. The unfinished one now had arms, wrapped around the other 2. And beneath it, she wrote, "Next year, don't wait for us. Just go. We'll always catch up." I folded the note, pressed it to my lips. Then I placed it beside the photo from last year, the one I took alone. And I smiled, because now there were 2 stories on that shelf. One of forgetting, and one of remembering. And both were mine. Spring came quietly. The snow melted in slow sighs, peeling away like old wallpaper. Birds returned to the trees, chirping like gossiping neighbors. Buds peeked through thawed soil around the cabin, timid at first, then bold. I stayed. For the first time in years, I didn't rush back to my house in the city. I didn't feel the clock ticking or the pressure to be available for someone else's convenience. I planted a small garden in front of the cabin. Herbs, potatoes, a few stubborn tomato starts. My knees ached every time I knelt, but the pain reminded me I was still moving, still doing, still here. Every evening, I wrote in a journal Alan had once given me. Save your thoughts like seeds, he'd said. Even the bitter ones can bloom into something. Jenna started calling every Sunday. Not out of guilt, not obligation, just calling. Sometimes she'd read me a recipe. Sometimes she'd tell me a story about work. Other times, she'd just ask me what the snow looked like. And sometimes, I didn't answer. Not to be cruel, but because I was outside. Because I was in the middle of a walk. Because I had learned, finally, that I didn't always have to be waiting for them. The first time she left a voicemail and didn't panic, I knew we'd finally made progress. Maddie sent letters. Not texts. Not emojis. Letters. One a week, folded into bright envelopes with stickers, and her messy teenage scrawl. Some were about school. Others were little poems. Once, she sent a packet of cocoa mix and told me to drink it under the stars. I did. And I cried when I did. Because she had remembered. Because I had mattered enough to be imagined, even from afar. In July, I returned to the city, but only for 3 days. The house was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had grown. I dusted the shelves, watered the plants, took down a photo that no longer needed to hang on the hallway wall. It was the one of all of us in matching Christmas pajamas the year before Alan died. We had taken it because it was tradition, but now it felt frozen, forced. I tucked it into a drawer. Some memories needed rest. On the 3rd day, I met Jenna for lunch. She had picked a quiet cafe. No distractions, no rushing. When I arrived, she stood up and hugged me like she hadn't just seen me 4 months ago, like I'd come back from something farther than the mountains. "You look younger," she said. I smiled. "I've been living." She laughed, but her eyes stayed soft. We ordered quiche and tea, talked about everything and nothing. The conversation didn't need to fill gaps anymore. It flowed like water from an unblocked pipe. When the check came, she reached for it. But I stopped her. "My treat." She raised an eyebrow. "Seriously? Consider it interest on the time I loaned you." She grinned. "I deserve that." Before I left, she hugged me again. Longer this time. "Next winter," she said, "let's stay a whole week." "You sure it won't be too cold?" I teased. She winced. "Ouch." We both laughed. But her eyes said it all. She wouldn't forget again. Back at the cabin, I framed one of Maddie's newer letters. It read, "Grandma, you were never too old. We were just too blind." I hung it in the hallway, right next to Alan's fishing rod. Fall brought color like fire. The trees burned orange and crimson. The morning sharpened. Smoke curled from the chimney again. And I, old bones and all, felt younger than I had in decades. I took long walks every morning. Wrote in my journal every night. Started a book, nothing fancy. Just pages of memories and truths and small rebellions. I titled it, "What Mothers Remember When the World Forgets." When the first snow came in November, I was ready. I chopped wood for hours, lined up kindling by the door, stocked the pantry. But I didn't wait for them this time. I didn't need to. I was whole again, not because they came back to me, but because I found the piece of myself I had handed away too easily. I reclaimed her. I welcomed her home. Still, on New Year's Eve, as twilight stretched over the snow-covered hills, I set 4 extra places at the table. Just in case. I lit candles, played Alan's favorite jazz album, and then I heard it. The crunch of tires over fresh snow. The opening of a car door. Voices. Laughter. I didn't move right away. I let the moment settle over me like a blessing. Then I opened the door. They were all there. Jenna, Eric, Maddie, even her boyfriend awkward, smiling, holding a bouquet of dried wildflowers. "You came," I said. Jenna stepped forward. "Of course we came." Maddie grinned. "We made a rule. Every year, we show up. Even if it's cold?" I asked. "Especially if it's cold," Jenna replied. We toasted with cider that night. Laughed until our ribs ached. Maddie played old records while we danced barefoot on creaky floorboards. I watched them, my family, and felt something deeper than happiness. I felt witnessed, seen not as a duty or a relic, but as the soul of something they wanted to keep close. Just after midnight, Maddie pulled me aside. She handed me a tiny, square package. Inside was a small wooden ornament, hand-carved, shaped like a snowflake. On the back, she had burned 3 words into the wood with a craft tool. She went anyway. I clutched it to my chest. A prayer. A victory. A truth. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the fire, the green cocoa mug in hand. Snow tapped gently at the window, as if to say, "See? You made it." I looked around the cabin. Still, warm, alive. And I whispered. They said it was too cold. Then I smiled. But they were wrong.